Right, let's get into our first topic then, and we want your calls on this. Are new homes more important than protecting the environment? Labour has begun the process of changing environmental protections in order to meet their housing targets. Developers will be able to start work on housing projects that risk polluting rivers and then work out how to deal with that problem during the construction. Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, and Steve Reid, the Environment Secretary, have told environmental groups that current rules just aren't working and that they want to find ways of restarting housing developments that have been put on hold. But is housing now, environment later the right approach? Yasmin, what do you think?
No, I don't think it is. There are two things that Labour's been kind of thinking a lot about. One is the NIMBYism, which is not in my backyard, which is a really serious problem in this country. You know, nobody wants any housing near them, which I think is scandalous, actually, when there's so many young people, in particular with our homes. And then there's the environmental, quite rightly, the environmental concerns that new housing development can cause additional problems, especially in our rivers and so on. And if I thought they were talking about NIMBYism, but according to Natural England, that it is about the number of rivers in the country which are in an unfavourable condition. We know why, and we know what's been happening to them, because we've talked about it on this show. And that new wastewater from new housing development would be a serious problem. And then we hear that Labour is saying that they would agree mitigations. I don't know what that means.
Well, ways of stopping the rivers getting as polluted with the new housing estate. So what they're going to say is start the development, but you have to solve that problem before anybody actually moves into the development, rather than you can't start the development before.
That's the wrong way around.
But we're never going to build anything.
I know.
If you don't do these things, nothing's going to get built. And it's very interesting, the not in my backyard argument. The way I feel about that is, I don't think that people necessarily don't want houses to be built, but I've seen where I live a very nice area that they're trying to build on Greenbelt. And what you find more is that there's problems with traffic already that have not been solved. There are not enough school places that have not been solved. It isn't that people don't want houses to be built. I think that's quite cruel to suggest that nobody wants houses to be built. Obviously, the sound and the building is not great, but we all put up with our neighbour getting an extension every now and again, knowing we had one 2 years back.
So you must live in a very good part of the country, because everywhere I've lived...
No, you have to, because you can't afford to move, so it's extensions or nothing.
Get some extension, the moaning, the complaining, oh my God. You see the side to your neighbours.
You can't get anything built. Yes.
You're going to have to put up with it being inconvenient to be able to build houses.
So the NIMBYism we've spoken about before, this is, and Labour have changed the laws on that in order to make it... The locals are allowed to talk about or debate how these buildings are going to be put up, but not if these homes are going to be built. So it's a slight difference in approach to that. What we're talking about now is actually what we're doing to our rivers and what we're doing to the environment by building on it. So this is building on green belt or grey belt, which is what Labour has renamed these areas that they're going to allow for new houses to be built. But on top of that, what that's going to do to our river networks, which are already fairly polluted and in a bad state.
Well, from what I've seen from new housing estates, I've seen nice things like they're forced to build a park. And I don't know about you, but any new housing estates near us has got a lovely little park with it. Or else they have to maintain a park that's close by if there's not the space, which is to the advantage of our children, which is wonderful. So I think that, you know, where profit is being made, I think that then saying that we expect an element of clean-up, I think that's a fair judgment call to make, because these are old-fashioned EU rulings, and if we don't change, I care about the environment I live in very much. However, if we don't make changes, we're never going to build houses. We're at a stalemate.
It is true, Yasmin. I mean, the previous government really struggled to do any kind of new builds. This government really wants to push them through, and we've got thousands of children living in insecure housing, and I know that's going to pull at your heartstrings, Yasmin.
Absolutely.
And so perhaps we do need to just say, OK, we'll come up with the solutions as we're building, but at the moment we just need to get building.
Well, I think so, but we have to be very, very careful, because building is kind of for the next 30 years, whatever you're building, 30, 40, 50, hopefully longer years.
Hopefully longer.
You know, so you have to make the right calculations. But the other thing is, the last Tory government allowed a lot of building to happen, was unaffordable housing. You know, where I live, huge number of flats have been built. Most of them are empty, being owned by people in Hong Kong, overseas, and that's just plain wrong. It was just for investment and so on. But there's also another... So I would be very happy to see a part of the housing plan ambition for people, for affordable, truly affordable housing.
Yeah,
or just council housing.
It's the hoops you've got to jump through to qualify for affordable housing. I don't know if you know any of that. It's absolutely ridiculous. Like the portion that's affordable and the tick boxes that you have to tick to qualify. It is ridiculous. It's not really. It's a tiny little pocket of people who got lucky.
Well, this is because there's so few of them now. The Labour government does want to focus on affordable housing and council housing, so we'll have to see whether the developers
the
adhere to that
water thing
too.
is very important. We haven't heard from Labour, I haven't. Maybe they've said it and I haven't seen it. What are they going to do about the water companies?
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it?
Created this situation. What are they going to do about
What
them?
consequences are these water companies going to have? It's outrageous when you think that our drinking water, in some instances, is not able to be drunk, like it's making people sick. We need a good chat with ourselves about that. That's not acceptable.
This is why environmental groups are really up in arms about Labour changing this. Also, we should bear in mind that Labour overrode the Conservative government last year when they tried to get rid of some of these environmental protections, and now they're getting rid of them themselves. So there's an interesting sort of U-turn on that too. Esther from Cheshire, you're up first on the phones. What do you think about Labour's now policy of homes first, environment second?
Where I live, we live between Jodrell Bank and the M6. The effects of our village having been increased so much causes huge issue onto Jodrell Bank for light pollution. And we also have a huge amount of traffic coming through the village when there's a problem on the M6. And the village is increasing, but the provision isn't. And this is where the problem is.
How do you feel when you hear that Labour is taking the approach that they want to build the houses and come up with the solutions for those sorts of things afterwards? Do you trust that these developers and that the government will take care of these villages after they've been expanded?
I don't, because our village has already been expanded beyond what it was supposed to.
I am presuming, though, that was under the Conservative government rather than our new Labour government. Do you have more faith in the Labour government, maybe making sure that these things are done?
No. It's been done under both governments.
I see. Okay. And what would you like to see done? Do you need more doctors? Do you need more road networks around where you are?
More doctors, more roads.
Everything.
Not more roads, actually, because we haven't got the space. The bypass for our village is the M6. Oh.
Well, I mean, yeah, I can imagine that causes serious issues if the M6 is blocked or something's happening there. Esther, I'm so sorry to hear about the struggles that you're going through, but I suppose this is going to be a copy and paste thing throughout the country where we're having to expand housing and maybe not putting in the infrastructure needed. Thank you very much for your call. Susan from Angus, what's your thoughts on this? There must be a fair amount of land in Angus to be able to build some houses.
It's lovely here. However, we've got to be realistic about this. We're getting more and more people coming into the UK, and we need both more social housing and affordable housing. I mean, otherwise, where are these people, where are they going to live if they could get anywhere at all? People are put up in bed and breakfast, they're left in hostels, you name it. If we are going to introduce and help people coming into this country, they need to be housed, and so do our own. We need to be housed too, with our families, our children and children's children. It could go on and go on and go on. So I understand the environmental issues, but what about people and the right to have a roof over their heads? And I want to say as well, since you've got Yasmin on, people say how wonderful she is and all that, but every time I see her, she puts her own view across. She talks over people who are trying to express their own opinions. Well, she's quite rude in a lot of respects.
Susan,
so I wouldn't want to hear from her at the moment. I just want to
Susan, sorry, I'm going to stop you there because
housing.
this is a conversation. You don't just get to come on and dictate what happens. It is a conversation. And Yasmin is here to have her point of view. That's the whole point of her. So she does sit there and share her point of view because that's what we ask her to do. And thankfully you do that, Yasmin. Thank you very much, though, for your call, though, essentially saying we need to build more houses because people have a right to have a roof over their head. And many people, particularly if you're in insecure housing, will feel that very acutely. But I suppose the quandary is, when these new houses get built, do you want to move into a house where, you know, the river next to you is completely polluted, you can't have your kids playing in it, or, you know, maybe you wouldn't have your kids playing in that anyway.
There's never, you're not allowed to pollute a river. It's not like as if they're saying,
now
you're allowed to.
But
the point is the clean-up, should the river get polluted when the building work is happening. So the point is, if they are liable for the clean-up, if that's made very clear that they are liable for cleaning up that river. In fact, if they're liable for cleaning up that river and maybe clean it up better than it was before they started building, wouldn't that be wonderful? If people are making profits, if people are earning money and making profits and running businesses at a profit, then there should be an element of responsibility. I fought for the Swift bricks in the houses. I had the lady on who said basically all you got to do is put one brick at the top of every new house that's built that would encourage swift birds to be able to nest. It was such an easy thing. And they said, no, we're not going to do it. And I thought, isn't that silly? I mean, it's not like it was price or anything, but it's more legislation. So, but I think that's really sad because I do think let's build and then let's make sure it's nice afterwards. And if you can make it nicer than when it was before they moved in, wouldn't that be great as well?
Well, that would be the dream right there. Terry from Kent, do you trust developers to build houses and make the area actually nicer than it was before they got there?
No, the problem is, it's all right building the houses, but when do you actually think about, where the sewage is going to go and where's the water going to come through? And if you're building 1,000 houses and you don't put back that, you could end up not having any sewage works. Well, so that means you've got to build a new sewage
doesn't go into the river, though. I mean, it's not okay. You don't build a housing estate and then pump all everyone's sewage into the river. That's not how it works.
But when there's heavy rain, the overflow does go into the river,
system,
and that's the point.
And we know that the water companies have left the system so poorly managed.
Yes, they have, and that's the water company's fault.
What I'm really interested in is that nobody's mentioning, certainly not the new government, what responsibility are they giving the water companies to sort out their mess now and make sure it doesn't happen in the future.
I do wonder, and Terry, you bring up the most important point is, I suppose, the sewage networks. And I believe it is the developers' responsibility to build in the infrastructure for that housing network for their sewage. I suppose the point that you're getting to is the infrastructure nationally is so poor and doesn't really cope with the amount of people that are currently here and currently adding to the network, that just an influx of more would probably tip it over the edge, and we would see our rivers sort of overflowing with sewage.
It isn't just to do with numbers. They have been so negligent. They just haven't done what they were meant to do.
But is that should the government be on top of that, or is that the water companies? I absolutely think so.
The last Tory government was incredibly indulgent of investors and their profits and so on. This government, if it is centre-left, has an obligation to make these companies, which have made a huge amount of money,
profit,
to share that profit and make this system better as is and as will have to be.
I'm wondering then, if we're going to allow this Labour government to tear up the rules on planning for the environment, whether they then have to put their money where their mouth is and actually improve the infrastructure in order to make it all a bit easier for everybody building, the developers included. Terry, thank you very much for your call. Deirdre from Northumberland, what's your view on this? Houses first, environment second. Do you think that's the way things have to be? We have a housing crisis after all.
Yes, I do believe that. I believe that we owe to the next generation of children that we do not have ever again tens of thousands of children in temporary accommodation living in terrible homes. And, you know, we see it time and time again on the television, regardless of the fact whether people want to build where they are. It's always people who've got a house who will complain and say, I don't want any more built near me. But we owe to society to give... it's shocking. We live in one of the richest countries in the world, and look at the people that's on the streets, and look at the children in temporary accommodation.
But
it's
Deirdre,
shocking.
don't we also owe it to them to hand over a country that has a rich environment, that our rivers are clean?
Well, yes, but it's up to the planners to make sure that the infrastructure is correct. And it's also, I think, what we need as well. When you build estates, you've got to put maybe shops in the centre of estates, because they don't do that anymore. Yeah. So people have to travel, even if they only need a loaf of bread or a bottle of milk, to the nearest supermarket.
There's no requirement to have any kind... You're absolutely right, Deirdre. There's no requirement to have any kind of shops or any infrastructure like that, other than, like I'm saying, about the parks. And that does need to be looked at. Schools, doctors' surgeries. Yeah, if you're doing mass development in that respect, those are things when those numbers, I mean, let's be honest, they probably keep the number just below so they didn't have to do those kind of things. But like the corner shop idea, absolutely right. You're having to get in your car, then bottleneck, get out of an estate to get to the big Asda or Tesco, whichever shop you choose to shop in. But it causes a problem then, because there's no shop on site. They've no requirement to provide that.
I suppose what Labour is hoping when they say that locals will be able to debate how these estates are built, not if they are built, that how would involve what else is needed. Do we need new GPs? Do we need schools? That is the hope. How much the councils will do this and how much the locals' voices are heard, I don't know. We'll probably a postcode lottery. Deirdre, thank you very much for your call. Thanks for all your calls on this.